Hi, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. As he already rightly gave the introduction, right? So we are really going to talk about now the regulations that is really impacting in the industry. Let me start with a question, right? What do you think, is sustainability really a game changer in the Web3 and AI space? Maybe just raise your hand, I know we got the information about the food trucks, but let's warm it up a little bit for the last session, right? Great. I think not many hands up, but yes, it is indeed. I think it is one of the topics which is really having a regulations behind it, and it is completely enabled by Web3 and AI. As a fun fact, if you consider, some of the solutions that is basically implemented in the space of digital product passport, like battery passport, in this space, more than 50% of the solutions is just based on blockchain. This is a real industry application. I think there was a lot of discussion this morning. Where is really the real implementation? If you see in this space, I think there are 50 companies or 100 companies, which you might have never heard of, but they are really implementing at this big OEMs, integrating with the real implementation partners like SAP. So this is really exciting space, to watch in. And we are going to walk you through in the next few minutes, on what are really the use cases. I think we need the clicker. Perfect, thanks, Valentina. So yeah, I think before we go into the agenda today, I think quick introductions. I'm Husen Kapasi from PwC. I'm leading the enterprise blockchain, portfolio. I'm joined by Valentina from the Hashgraph group. She is enterprise lead as well from the Hashgraph group. So together, we are going to walk you through on the key topics around this topic. So what are we going to talk about? First, what are really the use cases, what companies are focusing on? The second, really a concrete project example. And then, why we are working with the Hashgraph group and what we can actually enable at your company. So let's get into it. We did a survey, I think, end of last year with more than 1,000 companies to understand what is really the status of implementation of the sustainability solutions. To the surprise, this was conducted on a global scale, and we got really shocking numbers, right? So a lot of CEO agendas mentioned that they all are working on the sustainability topic, but in reality, only 12% of the company, had something really realized. This is really shocking, right? Everywhere you see in the annual report, the companies are saying we are doing sustainability, but at a full scale, realizing the sustainability is really still rare. But why? There is a reason. So if you see this space, there are a number of regulations, and I think Europe is the hub for regulations, to be honest, for this space. So there are a number of regulations that companies are flooded, not in one industry, but across multiple industries, right? There are 10 plus industries mentioned in the Paris Agreement. There are a number of regulations out there that company needs to follow. So they are confused, which regulations do I need to follow? And if I have a supplier in China, do I need to follow the Chinese regulations as well, right? So this is really the key confusion point for them. The next one is, there are so many numerous solutions out there, blockchain-based solution and non-blockchain-based solution, and every vendor wants to sell the solution. So they are really overwhelmed by the solutions out there in the market. And lastly, it comes with the complexity. So most of the regulation says, okay, I don't need information only from you, but from your whole value chain. Where is really the origin, right? And I think this is really the problem, because companies are not really able to solve the data inside the company, and this we are talking about the complexity of the value chain. So this is where, why there is really, we see as a key barriers for a lot of companies. However, there is a ray of light, right? So it's not all that dark. So, what we want to now touch upon is, what are really the key topics? Because sustainability, a lot of people talk about, right? And if you see the Paris Agreement and also a lot of documents out there, there are a number of topics mentioned in the Paris Agreement when it comes to the sustainability. But what you see on the screen is really a summary across E, S, and G. What are really the key topics companies are focusing on? And there is a regulation behind it, right? So this is really at the CSO or CXO agenda that they need to somehow deal in the next few weeks, months, or next year. There is a strict timeline for these topics. Maybe starting with environmental, I think this is really the most area, where we see the carbon footprint, right? So the carbon footprint scope 1, 2, and 3, the circular economy regarding the plastic recycling, very much, in retail industry, for example. I mean, in Germany, we have the Lieferkette-Gesetz, right? I hope I spell it right. So I think this is where it addresses really the human rights and child labor. I mean, on paper, it sounds good, but in reality, having a real impact on the ground, how do you track those things? This is really where, because in solution, having a number or statistics, it's fine, but what is really the real thing happening on the ground? This is where really the critical information is. And lastly, also, I think in terms of the governance, I think there is really a strict regulation that companies need to include sustainability information in the annual reports. So ESG reporting, risk management, I think this is really, again, another regulation, CSDDD, which company needs to follow. So these are really like the key topics, but I think how do we break it down from here? I mean, this, as more or less everybody knows about it, but here is what we summarized. These are really the key 6 use cases that companies are really working on. On each of these use cases is basically, an industry in itself, right? So, I mean, if you see, starting with the ESG reporting, there are so many solutions out there. It's a complete technical ecosystem out there just for the ESG reporting. Digital product passport, as I just mentioned, right? I think you can name it. From industry to industry, there is a specific solution vendor which is fully on blockchain and AI. For example, battery passport. This is really the most hottest topic in the automotive industry, where the deadline is February 2027. Every company needs to have, for each car they release, a battery passport. So automotive OEMs has a tremendous pressure to capture it. And I think, let me make and give you a concrete example why the blockchain is relevant. We have an automotive industry for the EV car, which uses a battery. So if we take a battery, there are 5 industries involved in this, starting with mining, which includes, the raw materials. Then we have the chemical industry. Then we have, the battery industry that is mainly in China. Then we have basically the automotive OEMs and the recycler. So how do you actually enable those 5 industries to share data on one, platform? Impossible. This is exactly also explaining some of the question we got this morning, that do you have a real case where the blockchain is irreplaceable? This is really the real case, because there is no one, database that every 5 industry companies are going to share it. This is going to be decentralized, and it is decentralized, right? So if you see the battery passport space, you can Google it. 80% of the solution are based on the blockchain base. They even so sophisticated, they even use zero knowledge proof protocols, right? So it's really surprising. You might have never heard of those companies. So this is really going to be the game changer. And I think there are a few more use cases, right? I think Valentina will actually cover on ESG and carbon tracking, but carbon credit, circular economy, circular recycling, and the paperless trade. These are really fundamental use cases where you see a lot of stuff happening. But let's actually get into the real project example. And with that, I will actually hand over to Valentina.
Thanks, Husen. So as Husen very nicely demonstrated the different use cases that we can have in the sustainability space. So here from the Hashgraph group, so we are an organization that works exclusively with the Hedera DLT. And the Hedera DLT basically is built specifically for enterprises. So it's one of the greenest, so it's the greenest chain that exists. And it's run by a group of large enterprises. So really all the projects that are building on top of it are enterprise solutions. So to tie it in, to give a concrete example of an application that is built on Hedera. So here we're looking at the ESG space. So let's look at the manufacturing sector, where there's some heavy industry manufacturing processes which are very polluting. So they emit a lot of carbon during the manufacturing process. So one of the challenges here, so this is obviously one of the key targets in the ESG space, to reduce the carbon that gets emitted into the atmosphere. So this use case here particularly, and this is a real life example which is in production today. So once the production, the manufacturing process goes on, there's this carbon capture and storage process which happens. So instead of the carbon being released into the atmosphere, it's then captured, transported, and stored. Then, to prove that all of this is done, you have an ESG report which needs to be produced. Now, the challenge that we see in this specific case, but with ESG reporting in general, is the fact that, well, first of all, the data is quite fragmented, and it's difficult to prove that this is real. So, of course, there are standards which exist, but it's still, like, the trust from the, well, either from the audit side or also from the public is quite low, because greenwashing is still quite rampant. So this is where Web3, and in this case Hedera specifically, comes in. So what they do here is, during the whole process of manufacturing, you have the carbon, which is a portion of it that's captured, and you have sensors which measure the amount that is captured. And then throughout the whole value chain of the capturing, the transportation, and the storage, so you have different sensors which track that, and all of this data is then logged on-chain. So you have three different parts. You have first the data anchorage, so using this Hedera consensus service, where basically it just proves that the data is accurate, hasn't been tampered with, and is the truth, but it's just data. Then you have the smart contract piece, where this data is enhanced. So either basically in order to be able to create a report, so to meet a specific reporting standard, or as well, for example, to add some plus minus a certain deviation for the data. And lastly, we have the token service. So a token is created to prove that this portion of carbon has been captured. And what it means is that the final result is an output of the manufacturing process of the end product, which then the consumers buy. You have a proof that the product that you're buying is actually green, so that the sustainability claims are real in this specific example. Yeah. So this is really a demonstration of the use of DLT to solve these kind of issues. And if we look at the ESG reporting space in general, so beyond this specific example, so we notice the problems here is, the problems that it solved is the fact that data is fragmented, so you can put the data from different pieces, bring it all together. It gives trust, so the fact that, because it's logged on chain, you can trust that this data is accurate, and it gives transparency as well. So whether it's for the end consumer or if it's for the auditor, you have this transparency of data. Now when we're talking, so the Web3 part gives trust. Now when we're speaking about AI and the future and what AI can bring as well in these kind of reporting processes, so there's a number of things that we're exploring today with some of our clients. One is what we would call a gatekeeper agent. So it's basically, before the data gets logged on chain, you need to make sure that it's correct. And how this would be done, for example, is you look at the sensors that produces the data, and for example, you could look at different trends. Let's say over the last 3 months, the data has been more or less within this range, so we can assume it is correct. And let's say it deviates from one moment to the next, so this could potentially raise a flag. This data can be then checked before logging on chain. So what this does is you actually prove the fact that whatever data is created, it's not just purely logged to show that, okay, this is what is created, it's also validated before it gets logged. Then you also have compliance agents, so basically this could help to generate the reports, because this still remains quite a fairly labor-intensive and manual process to be able to compile all this data, process it, put it into the correct format. So this is where Hedera comes in as well with one of our solutions. So this is one area. Also the audit agent. So an audit agent could be either from the public, for example, as an investor, you want to check that a company's sustainability claims are real. So you could take a report that is generated and run this agent, so you can cross-check data across different sources, detect anomalies within the data, either looking at historical data, industry benchmarks, or other kind of data sources to be able to detect greenwashing. And lastly, so this is more forward-looking, you can have an insight agent which would then, so for example, looking at the different sensors data that you gather, looking at different patterns and trends, and basically being able to predict, for example, when a sensor needs to be replaced or something like this. So it can give you insights into the future. So these are the kind of things that we are working on today, and obviously the biggest problem with our clients, the biggest challenge still remains the data integrity. And yeah, so to finish off, just maybe to give a bit of a brief context as to why we're here together and what is it that we do. So with PwC and the Hashgraph group, we've recently established a partnership. So PwC brings the expertise from the industry, value chain, regulatory know-how, and from the Hashgraph group, so working exclusively with Hedera, we bring the solution side of things. So we have a whole team of engineers and different organizations within the ecosystem that we work with to help bring this technology to life. So with this partnership together, we can really deliver for enterprises and governance the end-to-end solution. So starting from the conceptualization, industry know-how, all the way through to the implementation, deployment, and real expertise within this technology. Yes. And that meets specifically enterprise needs. So it's not just, because we always know that startups are often 3 or 4 steps ahead.
I think this is also stated in our booth motto, right? So we are really bridging the traditional economy with the Web3 world, right? So bringing the industry expertise, bridging with the Web2 integration of the IT architecture, which is existing today, and then how we integrate those things. And I think as Valentina mentioned, right, so the business, regulatory, risk and audit, this is all we can actually enable to the client. So you have really, from idea to execution, the full portfolio that we can enable at your end. So that's the key thing why we are partnering. And I think this is because I think we said about a program, but how does this program look like? This is, of course, exemplary, right? So don't focus much on the timeline because it depends on the use case that we are working on. But just to give you like a brief idea of how does this program look like, right? And what could be the time frame roughly around plus or minus on those areas. So this is how we actually go from idea to execution, right? So I think if you're really working on a specific use cases, that you think, okay, it could be interesting to explore, you can just reach out today or even tomorrow. Maybe you want to highlight a little bit on how we are working.
Yeah. So we also have a grant program at the Hashgraph Association, which is specifically targeting enterprises and governments who want to deploy real-world solutions using Web3 technology on Hedera. So this grant program enables this tech implementation. So whether it be through funding, if you want to build something yourself, or we also provide engineering in kind support, so where we have a team of experienced engineers, both in expertise with Hedera, but also expertise in specific domains, such as sustainability, but we have other topics as well that we're working on. And partnering together with PwC, we really can deliver this end-to-end solution. So if you're interested, please come and let's chat afterwards.
Perfect on time. That's the blicker for no time left. So I think thank you everybody for your attention. And feel free to reach out.
Thank you all.
Thank you.